Hello y'all, welcome back to Case Can Probably Read. My name is Casey and yours isn't. Of course, now that I think about it, Casey's a pretty common name, so it might be. It's time again to talk about all the books that I read this week. I finished 6 books, but I'm actually going to start by doing something I don't normally do, which is I'm going to talk about the books that I DNF'd this week. I don't normally keep really steady track of the books that I do not finish, but I thought since I'm doing this a little bit more regularly now, and I'm also participating in Asian Readathon, I might go ahead and share some of the books that I didn't finish because some of them had to do with the readathon. So, blah, 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 blah. I did end up DNFing Arsenic and Adobo by Mia P. Manansala. I just had a real hard time getting into this one. And I don't think it's because I'm not in the mood for mysteries per se. I think it's more because I wasn't in the mood for maybe cozy mysteries, and the flavor of this one I think was just not intense enough for what I was looking for if I was going to read a mystery. I loved the descriptions of food. When food is described well in books, I really like that. I don't know why, but the food in Arsenic and Adobo is great. It's a lot of Filipino recipes. The main setting that the book starts out in is in a family restaurant that serves Filipino food. I had a hard time really getting into the brain of this character, this main character, and kind of what she's going through. It starts with somebody dying in the restaurant, and then I kind of got to the point where she and her best friend decided that they were gonna start investigating on their own to see if they could figure out how this man had died. I felt like there were a lot of elements in the setup of the story that I don't know if they needed to be there, and maybe if I'd gotten further into the book, I would have seen why they were necessary. But I think that it was just, maybe it's because this is an author I'm unfamiliar with. I wasn't sure I could trust them to bring it back around, and I just wasn't into it enough to find out. Hopefully that made sense. And then the second book that I DNF'd was Jade Fire Gold by June C.L. Tan. Both of these books I talked about in my TBR for May. This is a good book. I'm not going to try and say that I read enough of it to be disappointed in it. I was interested in it. I was interested in the story and the characters. The world seemed very cool, but I'm just not in the mood for fantasy. So that was the issue that I encountered with reading this book. If I were in a mood for fantasy, I have this feeling this book would have been amazing. I'm just not feeling it right now. I think that maybe one day there's a good chance I'll want to read this one again. I'm at that point in my life where I'm not trying to read things and force myself through things that I'm just not in the mood for. I'd rather read what I want to read. And so this book just wasn't what I wanted to read right now. Now on to the books that I did finish this week. The first of which is Dial A for Aunties by Jessie Q. Sutanto. This is a great book. The way that the book starts out is you have the main character whose name is Medi. She comes from a Chinese-Indonesian family. She is part of her family's business with her aunts and her mother, which is a wedding business. So she is actually the photographer for this business, and her aunts do various other things for weddings. Well, on the eve of one of the biggest weddings of their career, Meddy's mom sets her up on a blind date with someone that she met online. Long story short, that date doesn't go as well as it should, and her date ends up dead. And so it becomes this like madcap comedy of Meddy and her aunts trying to hide this body of this man that has died, and also there are subplots that enter into this. Of course, you know, you've got this giant wedding happening in this big hotel on this island off the coast of California. So Meddy and her aunts are trying to do their job, but they're also trying to save their butts. And then Meddy runs into her ex, and the bride and the groom are also having their own little dramas as everything goes on, and it is just so much fun. This is just a real great rom-com. Just off the wall, chaos ensues, everything goes wrong rom-com. And if you're looking for something more lighthearted and fun, I definitely recommend this one. I really enjoyed reading it. I listened to it on audiobook, and normally I have a hard time with audiobooks because I just have a hard time processing things auditorily, but this one I actually really enjoyed. I listened to it as I was driving to and from work every day, and I didn't have a problem staying up with the story with this particular one, so I definitely also recommend the audiobook. Okay, the next book I finished this week was Bro and the Beast Book 2 by L.C. Davis. If you watched last week's video, I read the first book in this series, so I went ahead and read the second book, and I don't want to, because they're very short books, so I don't want to go very much into the story at all, because if I say any of it, I feel like it is a little bit of a spoiler for the rest of the stories. All I can say is this. I was interested because it seemed like a really weird idea of somebody accidentally like falling into a book and becoming one of the characters in the book. And the fact that it was a guy that fell into this Omega-verse book that was supposed to feature a woman as one of the romantic lead, and he becomes the romantic lead instead. I thought that was a really interesting idea. I wasn't sure how it was going to play out or if I was actually going to like it. But what I will say is that after having read the first two, I find it thoroughly entertaining. I want to read the third one. The third one is, according to Amazon, is supposed to come out, I think, at the end of this month. And I am excited to read it because book 2 ended on a bit of a cliffhanger. I don't know that this is for everyone, but if you're looking for something that is just really strange, really fish out of water, really fish out of water, this is interesting. All right, the next book I finished was The Tribulations of Ross Young, SUPERNAT PA, The Complete Works by A.J. Sherwood. Now, this was actually originally released as a set of serial stories. I think there were about 10 that were released, and then once they were all out, the author compiled them all into one volume so that you could read it from beginning to end. And so that's what I read. And one thing that I really like about A.J. Sherwood is their writing it's kind of like, you know how you go sometimes on Pinterest or on writing sites and you get these really weird writing prompts and you see them and you think, oh yeah, I would like to read a book like that, but then you don't think about it ever again, and you know you're never going to write a book like that. A.J. Sherwood, it feels like they found those prompts and then they wrote them. They wrote all of them. It doesn't try to be anything highbrow. It doesn't try to be anything fancy. It doesn't try to provide a moral or a lesson or, a message. It just is fun, and it is what it is. So what you have in this story is you've got Ross Young. He is the main character and he's a college student who is working at a gas station. But he has noticed as he's been working at this gas station, because he works the night shift, that the beings that seem to frequent this gas station are not normal human beings. There's something a little off about them that makes him realize that they might be like a werewolf or a vampire, or some of them are even like non-humanoid. I think the story opened up with him talking to sort of an amorphous blob that came in to buy an energy drink. So fun. He ends up getting a job as a PA to this supernatural clan because he's able to deal with all these situations without really blinking an eye. He just kind of rolls with it. And one of my favorite serials in there had involved some werewolves going to a pound and adopting the dogs, all the dogs in the pound. And it was just really cute and heartwarming and funny and weird, but fun, a lot of fun. AJ Sherwood has written another set of serials that I've read. This one's really good, but this other one is my favorite. It was called How I Stole the Princess's White Knight and Turned Him to Villainy, and that was like a 6-part serial. And that one was really cute. So if you're interested in anything like this that's just really lighthearted and off the cuff and not full of itself, these are really fun stories. The next book that I read was Woods of the Raven by Mary Calmes. It's either Calmes or Calmes. Calmes. All right, Woods of the Raven is a romance, and the two main characters in this are a witch who lives in a small town in New York and is also sometimes a local librarian, and the chief of police who has just recently moved to this small town to become the chief of police. And some strange things have begun happening around the witch's house. And you learn more about why he lives there, what he's guarding, and the relationship between the chief of police and the witch develops from there. And it was a really interesting idea. And I'm hesitant to say this about a book, but I think that this particular book did a little too much telling instead of showing. There were a lot of moments where I feel like the descriptions could have been more impactful and could have made everything more emotional and more meaningful. But instead of kind of describing the situation and the feelings around the situation, the author kind of just barreled in and told you what was happening. I did finish it, and the end I liked better than I feel like the rest of the book. But as a whole, it was a little difficult to just sink into and immerse. That's a good word. It was hard to become immersed in this story. All right, the next book that I read this week was Ex Appeal by Cathy Yardley. This one is the third installment in her Ponto Beach Reunion series, and it followed a different couple, a different romantic couple than the first two, but they were connected to those first two romances via a high school friend group that kind of comes back together in adulthood. It's about 10 years or so after they've graduated. So it was really a second chance romance is what I would say. This couple was together in high school and like early college, and then they ended up breaking up due to some really awful circumstances. And then in this book, they end up, in each other's orbit again, and they get a chance to kind of learn and explain what happened way back when and to progress from there. I don't know if there will be any more in this series. There might be. There are more characters in their friend groups that aren't matched up yet, so maybe there will be more, but we'll just have to see. And then the last book that I read this week was Never Have I Ever Punched My Roommate's V Card by Willow Dixon. I have never read Willow Dixon before. I was looking for something to kind of round out the week that wouldn't be too hard to finish after reading Ex Appeal. It felt like something that I would want to read, so that's why I started reading it. It is a new adult college romance. The characters are roommates in a share house at a university. One is named Finn. He's kind of nerdy. He's a virgin. For some reason, I read just like a lot of virgin books this month. And then he has a roommate named Beck, who is more of a jock, classically handsome. And they end up beginning a sort of like friends with benefits relationship that progresses into more. But Beck, this is also kind of it's a bi awakening romance. So he did not realize that he was bi before he started having feelings for and a relationship with Finn. It's pretty typical of what you would expect of a male college romance. It was an enjoyable read, and I did end up moving on to the sequel to that book. I'll be talking about that one next week, I think. But those are all the books that I read this past week. I finished 2 more Asian Readathon challenges by reading Dial A for Aunties and Ex Appeal by Cathy Yardley. So with those 2 books, I was able to finish 2 more. So I've finished 4 of the prompts. Just got 1 more to do this next week. Thanks for watching. If my brand of awkward appeals to you, please feel free to like this video, subscribe to my channel, or follow me on social media, which I will list below. And until next time, follow your heart. Bye.